At 0150 on May 19, 1944, Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton stood in the cramped Combat Information Center of the USS England, eyes fixed on the sonar screen, glowing in the dim red light. Beneath the black waters north of Bougainville, the operator's voice broke the silence. "Contact moving at 6 knots. Pendleton, 37 years old and on his first war patrol as commanding officer, had yet to claim a single submarine kill. The odds weren't in his favor. The Imperial Japanese Navy had positioned 7 submarines in a scouting line stretching across the sea routes toward the Marianas. A defensive net meant to spot and report any Allied fleet heading west. England herself wasn't a large ship. A Buckley-class destroyer Escort, 77 feet shorter than a standard fleet destroyer. But she was built for a singular purpose: hunting submarines. Half her crew were trained for anti-submarine warfare, and on her forward deck sat the weapon that made her unique: 24 spigot mortars, aligned in a circular array. The British had named it Hedgehog. Each projectile was a 65-pound bomb containing 35 pounds of Torpex, launched 200 yards ahead of the ship. Unlike traditional depth charges, these were fitted with contact fuses. They exploded only when they struck a solid surface. There was no thunderous underwater detonation unless they hit a submarine. Misses were silent. For nearly 3 decades, depth charges had been the standard anti-submarine weapon. Crews rolled them off the stern, set a hydrostatic fuse to a guessed depth, and prayed the enemy submarine was still there by the time the charges reached detonation level. It was a crude system, relying as much on luck as on skill. The statistics were merciless. During the war, British forces launched more than 5,000 depth charge attacks, resulting in only 85 confirmed kills, a success rate of just 1.6%. Submarines often escaped amid the chaos. Once the explosions went off, the surrounding turbulence rendered sonar useless for up to 15 minutes. By the time operators could resume tracking, the target was gone. The Hedgehog changed everything. By firing forward instead of behind, ships could maintain sonar contact throughout the attack. There was no water disturbance, no acoustic blackout. It was quiet precision instead of blind guessing. Still, early Hedgehog trials hadn't convinced everyone. The system averaged a meager 5% success rate in training. Captains distrusted its silence. They preferred the thunder of depth charges, the kind of sound that felt like victory. Pendleton wasn't sentimental. He trusted mathematics. 1 Hedgehog kill for every 5 attacks versus 1 depth charge kill for every 80. The numbers spoke for themselves. 4 days earlier, Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, FRUPAC, had decrypted a Japanese transmission from Submarine I-16. Destination, Bougainville. Arrival time, 2200 hours, May 19th. The intelligence was perfect. England and 2 sister ships, USS George and USS Robbie, were waiting directly along I-16's predicted route. Now at 0150, the contact was real. Pendleton's sonar operator tracked the faint echo, voice steady. Range, 1,500 yards. The Japanese submarine was diving. Standard evasion tactics. The enemy commander knew he'd been detected. He ordered radical turns and depth changes, trying to break sonar lock. Pendleton ordered, "Stand by, Hedgehog." The crew moved with practiced efficiency, loaders ready at their posts. At 1341 hours, England launched her first Hedgehog salvo. 24 projectiles arced forward and splashed into the Pacific. The seconds stretched into silence. Then nothing. No detonations. Miss I-16 had turned sharply inside the pattern. The second attack came minutes later. With 1 confirmed detonation at 130 feet. The explosion lifted England's bow, but failed to destroy the target. The third pattern missed entirely. Pendleton checked the fathometer. The readings revealed the problem. The submarine had gone deep, to 325 feet, far below the predicted depth. The fourth Hedgehog pattern fell short again. Then, at 14:33 hours, the fifth attack began. The sonar operator's calm voice cut through the tension. Bearing steady. Range 1200. Depth 300. The gunners fired. The mortars launched in a perfectly timed ripple, their projectiles tracing faint arcs before vanishing beneath the surface. Seconds passed, then 4 detonations, then 6. A violent blast followed, a deep rolling thunder that shook England from bow to stern. The ship's aft lifted clear of the water. Crewmen were thrown off balance, hands gripping bulkheads. 20 minutes later, the ocean began to reveal its truth. Oil, debris, and scraps of wood and cloth. The I-16 was gone. 107 Japanese sailors had perished. Pendleton had drawn blood on his first patrol, and the Hedgehog had proven its worth. But the victory came with unsettling news. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific intercepted another Japanese transmission. 7 more submarines were stationed in a patrol line north of the Admiralty Islands, precisely in England's path. The message reached Commander Hamilton Haines at Tulagi on May 20th. The decoded report was chillingly specific. The Japanese 7th Submarine Squadron had deployed 7 Type KO boats along a defensive line codenamed NA, stretching from Truk Island to the waters west of Manus. Their names were RO-104, RO-105, RO-106, RO-108, RO-109, RO-112, and RO-116, each carrying 56 men. Their mission: locate and report American carrier task forces moving toward the Marianas or Palau. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, commander of the combined fleet, relied on them as his long-range scouts. Haines quickly reorganized his small group. England, George, and Raby were to advance together, 3 destroyer escorts against 7 submarines. The odds were staggering, but Pendleton's first encounter had proven the Hedgehog could deliver results far beyond expectation. 5 Hedgehog attacks, 1 confirmed kill, 20% success rate, 4 times better than the weapon's early record. The crew believed in their ship now. They'd heard the explosions, seen the oil slicks, and watched the debris float. The numbers, once theory, were now reality. At dawn on May 21st, the trio departed Purvis Bay, forming a line abreast formation with 16,000 yards of spacing. They ran radar sweeps every 30 seconds, sonar pinging continuously into the Pacific dark. But intelligence had gone silent. The Japanese submarines were now maintaining radio silence, cutting off the code breakers. No more decrypted coordinates, no more convenient intercepts. The hunt would have to rely on the old methods: sound, calculation, and intuition. In his cramped cabin, Pendleton studied the NA line chart, tracing the predicted submarine patrol routes with his finger. The Japanese were nothing if not predictable. They positioned their submarines along the same routes Admiral William Halsey's fleet had used before, expecting the Americans to repeat their movements. But this time, the Americans had the upper hand. Frupak's intercepts had revealed the entire picket line's position. Pendleton knew where the submarines were. The challenge was to find them at the right moment. Submarine operations followed a rhythm. They surfaced at night to recharge batteries, dived at dawn, and ran submerged during daylight. After sunset, they surfaced again. The window for radar detection was narrow, minutes, sometimes seconds. Submarines were vulnerable on the surface but could dive within 60 seconds, disappearing below 200 feet in under 3 minutes. England's crew had drilled for that moment again and again. Her sonar operators could track a diving submarine, estimate its speed, and predict its new position. The Hedgehog launchers could be reloaded in 90 seconds, ready for another pattern. Each volley created a deadly circular field, roughly 130 feet wide and 30 feet deep. Every launch was a gamble. If there were no explosions, it meant a miss. If the ocean erupted, it meant the Hedgehog had struck steel. 7 submarines, 56 men each. 392 Japanese sailors. Each Hedgehog attack could end them all in less than 9 seconds. And England was sailing toward them. At Oro 350, on May 22nd, 1944, the radar operator aboard USS George broke the early morning silence. Surface contact, range 15,000 yards. The first submarine of the NA line had been found. It was RO-106, a Type Co boat, recharging her batteries beneath a moonless sky. She never saw the destroyer escorts closing in at high speed. Within minutes, George's searchlights stabbed across the waves, illuminating the Japanese submarine like a ghost on black glass. The startled commander of RO-106 ordered an emergency dive. Seawater gushed into her ballast tanks. Her bow plunged downward. The chase had begun. At 04:15, George fired the first Hedgehog pattern. 24 projectiles splashing in a circular spread. No detonations followed. The contact vanished into silence. 10 minutes later, England regained sonar contact at 400 yards. Pendleton's voice was calm, methodical. Mark bearing, track depth. The sonar operator called out readings in quick bursts. Range steady, depth 250, enemy zigzagging. RO-106 was executing textbook evasion tactics, constant depth shifts and sharp turns to throw off the Americans' calculations. But Pendleton didn't guess. He calculated. He'd studied every sonar return, every delay in echo. He could almost feel the submarine's rhythm. At 0458, England launched her first Hedgehog attack. The projectiles traced perfect arcs into the pre-dawn gloom, vanishing beneath the surface. Seconds passed. No sound. Miss. The submarine had turned 30 degrees during the descent, just enough to slip between the pattern. At 0501, Pendleton ordered a second attack. Fire! 24 contact-fused bombs plunged into the Pacific, descending toward 130 feet. 3 detonations erupted, then a blinding underwater explosion. The pressure wave rolled across the surface, rattling England's hull. Crewmen instinctively ducked as loose equipment clattered. 4,000 yards away, sailors aboard George and Raby felt the shock wave roll under their keels. At sunrise, an oil slick, half a mile wide, spread across the water. Thick with debris, splintered wood, twisted metal, fragments of uniforms. There were no survivors. Kill number 2. 24 hours after destroying I-16, England had claimed her second submarine. 2 kills in 2 days. Word spread quickly through the task group. At dawn, the 3 destroyer escorts reformed their line, maintaining 16,000-yard intervals. They advanced northeast, parallel to the NA line. The sea stretched endlessly, calm, deceptive. Somewhere ahead, 6 more Japanese submarines waited, silent and deadly. By now, the pattern was clear. England's sonar crew was sharper, her fire control faster, and Pendleton's instincts more precise than his peers. Even Commander Hamilton Haynes, leading the division from George, noticed. The next contact came on May 23rd at 0600. Raby's radar picked up a surface echo, range 22,000 yards. Another submarine, likely RO-104, had surfaced briefly to recharge her batteries. But the contact vanished almost instantly. The Japanese commander had dived before identification. For the next 2 hours, the Americans hunted. Sonar pings swept the depths, bouncing off thermal layers and false echoes. Raby fired 4 Hedgehog attacks, beginning at 617, all missed. The elusive RO-104 was turning inside every pattern. She was commanded by a skilled officer who understood the mathematics of survival. When Hedgehog projectiles entered the water, he'd pivot the submarine just enough to slip through the gaps. At 0717, George joined the attack. 1 pattern, 2, then 3 more, every one a miss. Between 7:30 and 08:10, the Americans launched nearly 100 Hedgehog bombs with nothing to show but silence. Pendleton watched the sonar traces, unmoving. He didn't believe in luck. There was always a pattern, always data. Commander Haynes's voice came over the TBS radio, frustrated but controlled. "Oh, hell, go ahead, England." Those 5 words would soon become legend. Pendleton adjusted course. The sonar operator called out bearings in clipped rhythm. Range 1200, depth 300, bearing steady. RO-104 was running deep, twisting inside the Americans' patterns. "Match her turn rate," Pendleton ordered. "Fire when steady." England's first attack missed. Again, the submarine turned at the critical moment. Pendleton didn't flinch. He'd learned from the previous engagements that submarines under stress tended to maneuver in predictable cycles. The Japanese commander believed he was improvising. Pendleton saw geometry. The second salvo fired at 834. 24 Hedgehog projectiles burst forward, splashing in an expanding circle. Moments later, the ocean convulsed. 10 detonations, then 12, overlapping in a single sustained roar. England's deck plates trembled. The ship's bow rose as shockwaves radiated outward. Through the roar, sonar picked up the unmistakable sound of breaking up noises, bulkheads collapsing, hull tearing under pressure, compressed air bursting free. Then came the final explosion, a massive detonation deep below, likely from ruptured batteries or torpedoes cooking off. The sea boiled. At 10:45, the first fragments surfaced. Oil, wood, twisted metal, shards of pressure hull plating. RO-104 was gone. Kill number 3. 3 submarines in 72 hours. An achievement unheard of in the Pacific War. England's crew moved through the motions with eerie precision. Every man aboard now believed in the Hedgehog, the sonar, and their captain's methodical calm. Pendleton's voice never rose, never wavered. "Reload Hedgehog, maintain contact." The other ships, George and Raby, had yet to score a kill. The men aboard them started to whisper that the England was charmed or cursed. Pendleton dismissed the talk. "It's not luck," he told his executive officer. "It's math." He was right. By May 24th, Arrow 20, George's radar picked up another surface contact. RO-116, 15,000 yards off the port bow. Once again, the Japanese commander reacted instantly, diving at Euro 130. 15 minutes later, England established sonar contact. Range, 1,800 yards. Bearing, steady. Pendleton's mind ran through firing tables. RO-116's commander was attempting a new tactic, staying shallow instead of diving deep. At 150 feet, he hoped the Americans would overshoot their calculations, setting patterns too deep. But Pendleton's sonar team detected the truth. They adjusted the firing solution instantly. At 02:04, England's Hedgehog launchers barked. 24 projectiles flew, splashing into the night. 3 detonations, then 2 more. No colossal blast this time, just a series of dull, heavy thuds. The shells had punched holes through the pressure hull. At 150 feet, even small punctures spelled doom. Seawater forced its way inside at nearly 400 gallons per minute through each 3-inch breach. The submarine began to descend, slowly at first, then faster as the weight of water increased. Inside, RO-116's crew fought desperately to seal the leaks. Pumps screamed, pressure gauges burst. The air temperature climbed past 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen vanished. By 0700, it was over. The submarine imploded silently under crushing pressure. At 0702, England's lookouts saw a thin oil sheen spreading across the morning sea. A few small fragments followed. Nothing more. Kill number 4. 4 submarines in 5 days. News of England's streak raced across the Pacific. In Washington, Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, read the reports with disbelief. 6 Hedgehog attacks had destroyed 4 enemy submarines. King sent a brief, famous message to the Third Fleet. There'll always be an England in the United States Navy. The phrase spread like wildfire among sailors from Hawaii to Leyte. It was both a tribute and a prophecy, but success came with a cost. Fame drew attention, and attention drew orders. On May 25th, Admiral Halsey requested that England be reassigned from frontline hunting to carrier escort duty. She was too valuable, too experienced to risk. Commander Haynes disagreed. 3 enemy submarines still patrolled the NA line, RO-105, RO-108, and RO-109. Pulling England now would leave the job unfinished. Haynes sent a blunt reply. Request permission for 1 more sweep. Halsey relented. The order came through that evening. Proceed with caution. Complete the mission. Pendleton gathered his officers. 3 left, he said simply. Let's finish what we started. The men nodded. The engines rumbled to life. The destroyer Escort that didn't miss twice turned northeast once more, her sonar pings slicing into the Pacific night. Ahead waited RO-108, and England's legend was far from complete. At 3:03 on May 26, 1944, the radar operator aboard USS Raby picked up a contact, 15,000 yards off the port bow, roughly 110 nautical miles northeast of Sealer Harbor. Another Japanese submarine, most likely RO-108, had surfaced to recharge her batteries. The Americans were closing in fast, silent, and confident. When Raby's radar pulse hit the submarine, the Japanese commander reacted instantly. Crash dive. Within 90 seconds, RO-108 slipped beneath the waves. But her move was expected. Minutes later, England's sonar picked up the echo, range 150 yards, depth 200 feet. Pendleton's voice was low and steady. Contact confirmed. Prepare Hedgehog. The Japanese commander made the same critical mistake as RO-116. He stayed shallow, believing the Americans would fire too deep. But England's sonar team had seen that tactic before. They adjusted instantly, setting fuses for 150 feet. Raby fired first. Her projectiles splashed harmlessly into the sea. No detonations. Commander Haynes's order came across the radio once more, a phrase that now carried both trust and inevitability. Go ahead, England. At 23:23, England's forward launchers fired. 24 Hedgehog projectiles streaked out, plunging in a perfect circle around the submarine's last known position. Seconds later, the ocean erupted. 4, maybe 6 detonations, merging into one deep, guttural explosion. The sonar screen flashed bright white, then went blank. RO-108 had disintegrated almost instantly. The pressure hull ruptured in multiple places. Internal compartments imploded in sequence. The submarine broke apart so fast that most of her 56-man crew never realized what happened. Within minutes, fragments rose to the surface. Oil spread across the waves in black ribbons, shimmering beneath the stars. Kill number 5. 6 days, 5 submarines, 279 Japanese sailors dead. In Tokyo, Admiral Soemu Toyota sat in the Combined Fleet Operations Room, scanning the submarine patrol logs. The reports were chilling. 7 submarines assigned to the NA line, 5 missing without a trace. No distress calls, no emergency pings, only silence. Something out there was killing his boats, fast, efficiently, relentlessly. He issued new orders to the surviving submarines, RO-105 and RO-109. Minimum patrol depth, 400 feet. No battery recharging unless absolutely necessary. New evasion procedure, run silent on first detection. No radical turns, no noisy maneuvers. Silence was survival. But it was already too late. The Americans had learned too much. England, George, and Raby continued northeast, their sonar pulses stabbing into the darkness. The Hedgehog cruise had become a machine. Reload times under 90 seconds, firing solutions calculated faster than the Japanese could react. Each man aboard knew they were part of something unprecedented. They just didn't realize that their luck and ammunition were running out. Each Hedgehog attack required 24 projectiles. England carried 240 rounds in total. 5 successful engagements meant 120 projectiles expended. Half her ammunition remained, barely enough for 5 or 6 more attacks. Pendleton calculated the numbers quietly. If the next 2 submarines proved as elusive as RO-104, they might run dry before the line was clear. At 2145 on May 30th, George's radar found another contact, 13 miles ahead. The submarine immediately dove. It was RO-105, the best-trained commander of the 7th Submarine Squadron. This time, the Japanese captain tried something entirely new. After diving, he descended to 400 feet, then shut down all engines. No propeller noise, no pumps, no vibration. The submarine drifted silently, hidden in a patch of disturbed water, a phenomenon sonar operators called a knuckle. Pendleton's team detected faint echoes, but nothing solid. The target could be anywhere within a 200-yard radius. The captain faced a dilemma: fire at a weak signal and risk wasting precious Hedgehog rounds, or wait, giving the enemy time to reposition. Pendleton waited. 4 long hours passed. The sonar pings came back empty. Then, at U-230 on May 31st, the contact grew stronger. RO-105 was moving again. Her commander's batteries were dying. He had to surface soon or suffocate below. But the Japanese officer had one more trick. At 03:15, RO-105 surfaced, but not where the Americans expected. The submarine had drifted with the current during her silent hours, 3 miles from the last contact point. George's radar caught the blip. Wrong direction, wrong bearing. The entire task group was searching the wrong grid square. By the time England turned toward the new position, the submarine was already diving again. Still, Even 90 seconds on the surface gave RO-105 enough time to run her diesel engines, recharging batteries just enough for a final escape attempt. At 0345, England re-established sonar contact. RO-105 was running deep and fast, 6 knots, heading northeast. Pendleton ran the numbers. Hedgehog bombs sank at 23 feet per second. At 400 feet, they'd take 17 seconds to reach target depth. In that time, a submarine moving 6 knots would travel 170 feet. The firing solution had to predict exactly where RO-105 would be 17 seconds into the future. Get it wrong, and the entire pattern would fall into empty water. The first attack came at 4:05. 24 mortars splashed in, sank, and vanished. Silence. Miss. The submarine had turned during descent. The second attack, at 0423, was closer. Sonar picked up the explosions just 100 feet away. Still no direct hit. RO-105 was changing speed erratically. 6 knots, then 4, then back to 6, destroying any rhythm the Americans could lock on to. 48 projectiles spent, 72 remaining. 3 or 4 more attacks, no more. Division Commander Haynes watched from George. The tension was palpable. The Japanese commander was playing chess under pressure and holding his own. But at 0447, Pendleton's sonar team noticed something. Every 4 minutes, RO-105 turned 30 degrees, first to port, then to starboard, back and forth like a pendulum. It wasn't random, it was human. Pattern confirmed, the sonar chief said quietly. Pendleton adjusted the firing solution, predicting the next port turn by 200 feet. Fire on my mark. Mark. At 0508, England's Hedgehog launchers roared again. 24 projectiles splashed into the Pacific. 4 detonations, then 5. The crew cheered, but the sonar display still showed movement. RO-105 was flooding, but alive. Reload Hedgehog. The next salvo, fired at 532. 8 detonations tore through the depths. A thunderous underwater explosion followed, the unmistakable sound of a submarine breaking apart. Oil and debris surfaced just after sunrise at 06:30. Kill number 6, 12 days, 6 submarines, 335 Japanese sailors dead. When the after-action report reached Admiral Halsey, even he struggled to believe it. One small destroyer escort, using a weapon most captains distrusted, had wiped out nearly an entire submarine squadron. No ship in history had ever done the same. Halsey's message to Washington was brief. Recommend immediate reassignment. Mission complete. Admiral King approved. The order arrived on June 1st. Withdraw England from anti-submarine operations. Mission accomplished. Effectiveness of Hedgehog system confirmed. Pendleton read the message in silence. He'd known it was coming. England had fulfilled her purpose. The weapon had been proven beyond all doubt. Across the Pacific, new destroyer escorts began receiving Hedgehog training manuals based directly on England's firing data. Every sonar operator, every gunnery officer studied her methods. The patience, precision, and predictive math that turned a skeptical weapon into the deadliest sub-killer of the war. RO-109, the final survivor of the NA line, received Admiral Toyoda's warning just hours after RO-108's destruction. She dove deep, broke radio silence, and fled toward Truck Lagoon, abandoning her patrol station. She survived the war, one of the few. Months later, when her crew learned that 6 of their sister submarines had vanished in just 12 days, they simply refused to believe it. No one could. But the numbers were real. 6 submarines. 15 Hedgehog attacks. A 40% success rate. 25 times more effective than depth charges, 8 times more effective than Hedgehog's pre-war average. USS England had changed anti-submarine warfare forever. By the morning of June the 1st, 1944, the USS England's decks were slick with oil, salt, and exhaustion. Her men had been awake for almost 48 hours straight. 6 confirmed submarine kills in 12 days, an achievement so improbable that even England's own crew had trouble believing it. Admiral William Bull Halsey, commanding the Third Fleet, received the report at dawn. 6 submarines destroyed: I-16, RO-106, RO-104, RO-116, RO-108, RO-105. Every attack recorded, every kill verified. He forwarded the message to Washington with a single line: recommend commendation, unprecedented operational record. In the Navy Department, Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, read the telegram twice. The data was undeniable. 1 destroyer escort had eliminated nearly an entire Japanese submarine squadron with a weapon most commanders still viewed as experimental. King dictated his reply personally. There'll always be an England in the United States Navy. Within hours, the message spread across the Pacific like wildfire, through carrier task forces, repair ships, island bases, and mess decks. It became a rallying cry. But Pendleton and his crew barely had time to celebrate. They were still in enemy waters, still part of the war. At Tulagi, Commander Hamilton Haines received orders from Admiral Halsey himself. England was to return to escort duty. The ship had done enough. Her experience made her too valuable to lose. Haines, who'd watched Pendleton's precision firsthand, initially protested. 3 more boats remain unaccounted for, he radioed. If any survive, they'll still be feeding intelligence to Toyota's fleet. Halsey relented, slightly. 1 more sweep, and then England was to withdraw. But no more aggressive hunts. Pendleton complied. He'd proven his weapon and his mathematics. The Hedgehog system was no longer a theory. It was doctrine. By June 3rd, England was en route to Manus Island for resupply. Her crew finally slept, some for the first time in days. In the radio shack, a signalman pinned Admiral King's message to the bulkhead next to the ship's action reports. The ink bled slightly from the humidity, but the words remained legible. There'll always be an England. Meanwhile, back in Tokyo, Admiral Soemu Toyota faced a disaster. The NA line had been annihilated. The 7th Submarine Squadron, destroyed in less than 2 weeks. He issued strict orders to all surviving submarines across the Pacific. No patrols beyond 400 feet. No transmissions without encryption authentication. Immediate retreat if detected by sonar. But the damage was done. For the rest of the war, the Japanese never re-established an effective submarine picket network. Their eyes beneath the sea had been blinded by a single destroyer escort, armed with 24 spigot mortars and unshakable discipline. In Washington, the Naval Ordnance Department analyzed England's combat data. Engineers compared every sonar trace, every firing log, every detonation interval. The results transformed U.S. anti-submarine doctrine. By September 1944, all newly commissioned destroyer escorts and fleet destroyers were ordered to carry Hedgehog launchers, mounted forward to allow continuous sonar tracking. Training programs across the Atlantic and Pacific fleets were rewritten overnight. Sonar operators were drilled to emulate England's crew, tracking targets with mathematical precision rather than intuition. Gunnery officers practiced rapid reloads. Fire control teams studied England's firing geometry, the exact spacing, delay, and timing that had yielded 6 kills from 15 Hedgehog attacks. The transformation was swift. Within a year, Allied Hedgehog-equipped ships had sunk 47 German U-boats in the Atlantic, nearly 18% of all engagements. It was still nowhere near England's record-breaking 40% success rate, but the standard had been set. Pendleton's ship had rewritten the equations of submarine warfare. The USS England continued her patrols through the summer of 1944, mostly performing escort and screening duty for carrier groups pushing toward the Marianas. The seas were calmer, the work quieter, but the legend of her 12-day hunt followed everywhere she went. Her crew painted 6 small submarine silhouettes on the bridge, 1 for each kill. Sailors from other ships saluted them when they passed, but the ocean that had once brought triumph would soon bring tragedy. On October 31, 1944, during the Leyte Gulf operations, England was screening a transport group when a kamikaze aircraft broke through the defensive line. The Zero's pilot dived almost vertically, releasing a 500-pound bomb seconds before impact. The bomb penetrated England's forward engine room, detonating near the main turbine. The blast ripped open bulkheads, killed 37 crewmen, and wounded 25 more. The ship caught fire, listing hard to starboard. Damage control parties fought through smoke and steam, sealing compartments and jettisoning ammunition to keep her afloat. After 6 grueling hours, the fires were finally contained. But the damage was catastrophic. When the damage reports reached fleet headquarters, the decision came swiftly. Repairing England would take 6 months and cost more than building a new destroyer Escort from scratch. The order was final. USS England was to be decommissioned. She was towed to Manus Island, stripped of radar equipment, guns, and electronics. Her once proud Hedgehog mount was unbolted from the deck and shipped to the Navy Museum in Washington, D.C. By November 1946, the hull of England, the most successful submarine hunter in history, was cut apart for scrap. The steel that had destroyed 6 submarines in 12 days became razor blades and tin cans. Her service life had lasted barely 2.5 years. Still, her record stood and still stands. No other ship in any navy, before or since, has equaled her achievement. 6 confirmed submarine kills in 12 days. A 40% attack success rate. A single destroyer escort rewriting global doctrine. Lieutenant Commander Walton Pendleton received the Navy Cross for his leadership and tactical brilliance. The citation praised his courage, his composure, and his ship's unmatched precision. But it didn't mention the thing that mattered most to him, the mathematics. Pendleton had trusted numbers when others trusted instinct. He'd proven that in warfare, as in science, precision could be more deadly than power. After the war, he was promoted to commander and assigned to an escort division in Alaska, continuing anti-submarine patrols in the North Pacific until Japan's surrender in August 1945. He retired from the Navy in 1961 after 34 years of service and passed away in 1973 at the age of 66. His headstone in Arlington National Cemetery bears his name, rank, and the words Navy Cross. It does not mention England. It does not mention the 6 submarines. In October 1960, the Navy fulfilled part of Admiral King's promise. A new ship, the USS England, DLG-22, later reclassified as Site-G-22, was commissioned as a guided missile cruiser. She served faithfully through the Cold War, from Vietnam to the Persian Gulf, before being decommissioned in 1994. When CG-22 left service, the name England vanished from the fleet. Admiral King's declaration, "There'll always be an England," was quietly broken. Today, the original Hedgehog launcher from DE-635 sits in storage at the National Museum of the United States Navy in Washington, D.C. The paint is faded, the metal rusted. The placard mentions Hedgehog anti-submarine projector, proven in combat. It does not mention England or her 6 victories. Visitors walk past it without noticing. Few realize they are standing before the very weapon that changed the course of submarine warfare. Japanese naval archives recovered after the war confirmed every one of England's kills. The reported loss coordinates for I-16, RO-106, RO-104, RO-116, RO-108, and RO-105 matched England's action reports precisely. Their logs ended abruptly, entries describing multiple explosions above, severe flooding, and total loss of control. No survivors. The Japanese commanders never understood what killed them so efficiently. They never knew about the forward-firing mortars, the contact fuses, or the silent arithmetic that guided them. The British had invented the Hedgehog. The Americans had perfected it, and England had proven it. If this story moved you, do what those sailors never could. Make sure it isn't forgotten. Like the video, subscribe, and share the story of the ship that hunted the hunters. Because sometimes, history doesn't belong to the biggest guns or the loudest victories. Sometimes it belongs to the quiet ones, the ships that trusted math over myth. And no ship ever did that better than the USS England.